So why they lose focus of the microphone. At the very least, I want to know if the microphone is working. Uh, Test. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It seems to be working. I think I should probably mute myself. Uh, are we? Also, does this not have the black outline? Why does it look so different on one side compared to the other one? What's up with that? Anyway, here we are. Good good morning, I guess. Stuff happened, and I said I said before this last stream. You know what? I would like to be more consistent. Yet I wasn't to an degree. It can happen, I guess. Don't expect the stuff from people. Nice idea. Don't expect anything, if possible. Anyway, here we are. Continuing. Sorry. Um, After quite a while, I think I finally found where I wanted to continue with this. I said before, I didn't expect for this whole series to be so long and so disperse about so many different things. Also, I was when I started, I simply believed it was going to be a lot shorter and a lot simpler to talk about any of this stuff in any way, not what ended up happening like right now and what is at this point a 6 parts long series. It was more like it takes some effort certainly to minimally think what is going to be said and to not be so meaningless when speaking. But besides that point, I didn't believe it was going to be by itself something so extensive simply because it had to contain so much information about so many different parts of what can be called this idea of utilizing the particular efforts of an individual towards whichever goal they want, that is human efforts. So yeah, that's the main point as always. But no, yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. We are kind of running on a low or a short time slot, so to speak. I might have listeners instead of me than what I can realize right now. So we better get going and get started with this. Also, it's complicated, so I will try to make it as minimally understandable as I can. It's a weird idea to begin with. The sixth part is about this whole concept of the future and how it is that the human should try in any way to consider what is the present of itself and what are the different goals that it has set in life, and all of that plethora of ideas that pertains this dream, so to speak, of realizing what a human is trying to achieve. The amount of time that they exist, also combined with the amount of time that they can properly put into whichever activity that they are seeking to do. And if something is to be said, it is that in general, humans struggle too much with all of this group of things. It's, I think, a troublesome part of life for most people. I wouldn't particularly want to point out at any direction in terms of attributing which thing itself has the biggest part of blame to take on for this, but it certainly is in general a problem that in so many ways the human seems to not have enough ways to realize the importance of being organized and all of that. And this correlates directly with if you want to be living a proper life and want to aim towards anything that feels satisfactory enough and all of that. You cannot ignore the side of you cannot focus on what might be coming next if you don't even know what you're doing right now. So it's by itself already an abstract concept, simply because in many ways the human doesn't think about any of that. So it feels annoying to have to start with that. It shouldn't be so much of a problem. I Instead of the many things that one learns, it is a repeated part of the concepts in many ways and in too many fields that are, at the very least, in the surface level unrelated, that the human has many struggles with what is organization of life in general. So it feels bad to simply start with that, but it is something that if it were to not be mentioned and if it were to be made something tinier than what it actually is in reality, after all, I think so. I would believe it is appropriate to say at the very least right now, in the modernity in which we are living, in the present times, 2025, what you find out the moment in which you look out is, in many ways, there are problems not because of what is happening in any negative manner around everything else that exists, but rather around what is, in some way or another, this whole group of situations created by the individuals who were incapable of properly managing what has to do with living, I guess. With simply living. It's an incredibly unorganized life what we are dealing with in general. And also, uh, I played the music. Welcome, Metal Sierra. Sort of not saying anything. But yeah, that's basically like the beginning of this sixth part, I guess, that it cannot be avoided. You cannot just start by saying, oh yeah, we are going to talk about the future. No, it isn't simply. And there are so many great things to come, and there are so many promises that we can make. If you don't even accept that, indeed, it is an almost insurmountable struggle for many people to try and deal with any of that. In many ways, the human in the present times seems to be very incapable of handling what is the already existing responsibilities that they have in their lives, to even more believing in any capacity that it might be interesting later on to try and organize themselves in an even more complicated manner, to try and aim at anything that has to deal with, so to speak, the future and what might come years from now, and what might be the future, not of even the life that we are having ourselves as an individual, but rather the life of those who might come decades and generations after we ourselves are gone. So it's like an overly complicated endeavor if you see it from the right angle, so to speak. And the reality is also, it it sounds more pessimistic than what it truly is. It doesn't take that much time to try and in any way measure what you are aiming for. As kind of going a little bit back, what we are trying to talk about here is simply, instead of the individual, anybody might have, to any degree, different goals, different objectives, and different things that they might want to accomplish. And it is understandable then that if you are trying to aim for anything, you will have a certain need to follow, at the very least, some sort of guide or something. You need to do something. If basic law of life, if you want to obtain something, you need to do something else, so to speak, in order to get what you are wishing for. You cannot expect that simply because instead of you to desire to obtain something has been manifested out of nowhere, you will gain that possibility, and out of nowhere you will find yourself moved to do stuff, or not simply to do stuff, to obtain without any action what you are looking for. It is in the process of, once I am interested in something, I need to plan out, so to speak, what will be the enabling steps that I will have to take in order to have in my hands at the end of that process, journey, whatever you want to call it, that certainly the object of my desire, and how much time will all of that take, how much energy, and which kind of actions in general will I need to be performing, and more basic descriptions like, yeah, how many repetitions will I have to do to obtain this thing, like understandable example. If I want to have a good physique, I cannot expect to simply one day out of nowhere wake up with a good physique. If I find myself to be incapable of possessing a good physique, it doesn't mean that I will never have one. Even if I wish for it, it means that as long as I am interested in getting a better looking one, I can portray in my mind fiercely what is the subjectively better looking physique, and with which kind of exercises I can be minimally more proximal to that type of dreamed physique, I guess. It doesn't happen once again, as I have said already this month like 6 times. Simply because you wish for it, it happens. It happens with the combination of many different parts of the whole process of any interest that anybody gets to have in their hands what they want. And inside of that is this whole discussion of I have something that I am highly inclined to possess, that I find myself be clearly interested in, and then I might as well not just be by myself interested in that, but the bigger scale of humans, I might see it necessary to try and pursue something a little bit bigger than what is just my present self and all of that, because I, at the very least, can imagine or can start to imagine how good things would be if we were to finally possess all of those certain traits, certain qualities, certain changes inside of society, so to speak, whichever kind of way of portraying the idea you want to go with. Because once again, we're not even discussing how how is it that you obtain any one particular level. It's something that applies from the most basic ground of, yeah, oh, one day I wake up and I find myself motivated to perhaps not be so negative with the world. Perhaps what I want to change is simply how I live my day-to-day life. It doesn't need to be the inspirational story about an individual who once woke up with the motivation to change the world. It doesn't need to be something so grandiose and so incredibly absurd to a certain extent. It simply is, yeah, one day I find myself to be interested simply in perhaps taking a little bit of a better care about what I am doing, what I possess actually in my life, and what I can continue doing in order to ensure that at the very least this degree of satisfaction keeps existing for now. As basic as that is what we are talking about. And in this case, finally starting to get once again into the topic, quote unquote, if you can even call it that, is instead of this whole process, not trying to make it something so easily understandable. It takes too much effort, but there is this part of projecting and being capable of imagining stuff into the future, having an interest into what might come afterwards, what might be finally that reward that somebody gets after having put so much effort into anything. That satisfaction and that I will even go as far as to say in some cases that minimally observable objective for which one is working. Sometimes, I mean, yeah, the reality is it shouldn't sound so bad. It shouldn't even be something that we should be discussing right now. But sadly, in the present era, it happens like too often, uncomfortably often, that the human works for things that they never wished. We're spending, I think, like 50% of our time in the modernity doing things that you never had an interest on. You don't even possess a proper reason behind what you're doing. You don't even find it satisfactory. Not in the present moment. Stuff like, for example, doing physical exercise. You will unavoidably not feel good, but you're doing that because at the very least you have a justification for what it is that you gain after having exerted yourself and having tried your best to minimally restore your physique, to minimally work and get in a better shape. But it doesn't happen that you have any of those ideas, any of those dreams, insights into what will come as a reward for you in most of the common activities of the present life, in most of the things that anybody does, so to speak, simply because they are interested in giving it a shot in any manner. It's a constant struggle to find to to try and justify the act of continuing forward, the act of trying to move into a, so to speak, better life without even having a justification as to why is it that in the present moment one is enduring many of the things that one is, so to speak. It certainly is abstract because to a certain degree there is also so much denigration and so much belittlement of what is truly the capacity of feeling good in the life of anybody, that you hear somebody say, and maybe you're not truly enjoying what you have around you right now. Maybe you're not really having any kind of satisfaction gained by trying a minimal degree of effort into any kind of action that you do, any kind of minimally interesting thing that happens in your life. Maybe you're too much invested in stuff that never rewards you in a way in which it feels truly rewarding. Not the instantaneous type of reward is always there. You can always spend the next 5 hours of your life scrolling through media that literally never gives you anything worth your time. You can always try to keep on looking for the next video game that will be interesting. You can always keep on talking with people, trying to find somebody who might be minimally different in a way in which now your social relations with the rest of the world won't be as boring as everything else is in comparison to this accepted normality in which nothing ever happens, nothing interesting ever occurs, nothing minimally full of flavor of that flavor of life that has so much not simple taste, but rather that satisfactory side of it in which you can realize that there is a complete type of reward gained by trying to do what you do, and a minimally interesting gain in doing what you are aiming for, not simply because you are spending your time doing it, but rather because you are investing yourself into doing what you do, and you are pursuing what you are trying to do, and you can every single instance of that adventure have the knowledge, be completely sure that what you are aiming for is in any way interesting and is in any manner useful enough in any way, it it doesn't it doesn't happen that out of nowhere one gets to be satisfied like that, and it's too much of a normalized thing. Once again, the modernity, I guess, it's the description that we're going with. Also, uh, sorry, thank you for the follow. Apex Legend player, welcome. And yeah, I should have taken off that stop rambling. I literally don't do anything else besides that nowadays when I am streaming like that here. But anyway, welcome. Here we are. Continuing on. I guess quick rundown, just in case, just to tick that little ADHD brain that seems to be so normalized lately. Wow, what has been happening so far? Discussion, human efforts, particular topic of today, the future. Wow. Um, what are we even trying to talk about? Was how is it that you can anybody anybody can try to understand this topic of what's the point? What are you even trying to go with? What is even the idea that is trying to be discussed with? That is that is trying to be discussed in this particular moment of how is it that any human can try to see the potentially useful part of existing in the present and all of that, and trying to move towards any kind of future. Um, it's I wouldn't say an impossible task, but it's rather a subjectively abstract one. It takes, yeah. You cannot really begin on describing how anybody has to think out the future if you don't even try to spend a little bit of time realizing that indeed there are many different conditions that need to already exist in life to have that possibility. If you don't have, that's okay. That's what I was trying to say before. If you don't have all the different conditions that can minimally enable you to experience a satisfactory life and have enough of I wouldn't say calm. It doesn't mean that because you're not having a, a simple life, you cannot aim towards the future. It doesn't mean that because there is chaos out of nowhere, you are completely robbed of the possibility of aiming anywhere else. Also, excuse my dogs. They don't know that I am fucking streaming, so they don't give a fuck. Anyway, the point is, you certainly have to find it find it inside of yourself. The interest. That's the real beginning of this whole adventure of wow, I want to immerse in anything. I want to try and put my energy into thinking about the future. Uh, What if I were to give it a try? What if I were to, at any instance in this present moment, try to minimally observe what might be coming next instead of simply sitting here and doing absolutely nothing? What if I were to, instead of wasting so much time, be trying to minimally portray what might be the future that I will have to live on? Simply with that, once again, with the interest in doing something like that, it is that the human is enabled to start imagining what might happen next, certainly. And inside of that, it already is, to a certain degree, easy enough. It doesn't need to be an overly complicated process. It doesn't need to have so many types of structures and so many things that need to be avoided and whatever you want. It, it, it is a lot more basic. You're on an incredibly simpler scale of, you know, you live in a world in which you have stuff that you can change, and you can do stuff in other ways. You can occupy yourself with other things that can certainly be in any way modified by your actions. If you were to minimally grow the capacity, I guess, cultivate that skill of discerning, wow, what can I do and what can I never in any way influence, no matter how hard I try and how many times I do the step that I believe will lead to that, so to speak, change in the world. Once anybody tries to do something like that, it is that the possibility of imagining any other future becomes a little bit better. It doesn't need to be an overcomplication of, yeah. The human, when it tries to think about the future, has unavoidable problems because it certainly starts with the overthinking. Every single human is bound to overthink. It doesn't work like that. It's I think it is to a certain degree the wrong conclusion, but at the same time, I don't truly find another way to describe it as there is too much shielding in the present world from anybody having the opportunity of, yeah, you know what? You already found it inside of yourself. The interest to think about what might be next. What will be of me in the next 20 years of my life? What will be of my existence in general? The moment in which I stop thinking simply about what I am right now, the moment in which I have to give it up for a second. What is the satisfaction of having everything given to me or having everything that I want as of right now already existing around me? What is going to be of me in the next week, in the next month, in the next year, decade, in the next 20 years? I am going to even be capable of living 20 years? Will I even have the capacity of doing anything interesting in the next 20 years? What is interesting? What do I even want to do in those 20 years? What is something that I can find in any manner satisfactory enough and try to spend it doing that? Do I even have the possibility of doing any of those things? Do I even possess any of those ways of obtaining that satisfaction? Also, you already said something in chat before reading that, so you get called out. Welcome, Sam. Thank you. Welcome and thank you. Also, give me now that I stop for a second, let me drink something meanwhile. But yeah, it's a I would say it. I don't think honesty is particularly the correct word to use it certainly is bound to be full of lies to a certain degree. You cannot expect that you're going to make realistic desires and that you're going to have realistic expectations of the future. To a certain degree, I think everybody has that part inside of them in which what you are hoping for, to as long as you're, let's say it in this manner, as long as you're not depressed, probably what you will be expecting for is, at the very least, for an incredibly good looking picture, and not in the sense that it is impossible to achieve, but it is something that will take you lots and lots of efforts to properly have in your hands, and it will be something that will require lots of energy that you probably don't have right now, and skills that you never even knew how to have in the past, to be capable of saying, yeah, I am moving myself towards any of those things. I am trying to gain any of that by myself, and I am trying to be in any manner satisfied in a better sense, not simply because I am continuing to pursue what I already have, but because I have defined what seems interesting, and I am trying to minimally ensure that I can have, even if not completely that satisfaction, at least a fraction of what is so far what I could have decided, the satisfactory enough side of life, the interesting enough piece that will come after this already existing one. The Yeah, I think it will not be wrong to call it the next act that has to come in my life. What is all of that, and what is all of those things that I find interesting, and what are all of those summed up in the end satisfactory moments that I was capable of having once I finally reached the future, and also at the same time the same future in which I will be living, that will feel good enough for me. It is quite wrong to simply discard it as, oh wow, yeah, you need to be optimistic. I don't think there is. It's hard to describe it. It's too it's too complicated to try and describe it to a certain degree. You need to have expectations that are impossible to make out in reality. You cannot live a depressing life in which you simply expect for tomorrow to simply be alive. You cannot live life something that can be so incredibly full of adventure in so many ways as simply, yeah, you know what, tomorrow I will wake up and I will do what I already do, and I will try my best to survive. There are so many ways in which you can ensure that you can have anything that feels rewarding enough. You can have in so many manners that minimally intriguing part of existing, that satisfactory enough realization of, yeah, I am using my time in something that feels minimally good. I am doing what I can with what I have, because that is also important. You cannot expect to have every single thing that you want out of nowhere. Once again, there are a thousand, a billion different steps that you will need to follow in order to obtain what you want. But it doesn't mean that it is going to be always painful, or that because you will have to use your efforts on that particular task, now you are condemned to suffer. It's, to a certain degree, quite the opposite and quite the contrary realization of, yeah, you are given the opportunity of, at the very least, trying to do anything and trying to whatever is it that you find fulfilling. You can portray a lot of stuff inside of that. The world, instead of observing, instead of trying to realize, of trying to consider what might be next instead of the future and all of that discussion, there is a piece of, and the world certainly doesn't give a fuck. You can say it with softer words if you want. You can go with the description of, yeah, the world is an uncaring place. It's a, to a certain degree, something will say, it's a cynical and depressing place because nobody tries anyways to be there for the rest. There is not so much of a negative reality. People simply don't care, and that's it. But not because nobody cares, it doesn't mean that you're incapable of doing whatever you want. Not because tomorrow you try and do anything that you found inside of yourself. You gave yourself the possibility of thinking. You gave yourself the chance of minimally trying to decide once again by your own methods what might be rewarding enough. And once you found such a conclusion, it doesn't mean that because you didn't get it instantly, now it's garbage. Time to discard everything that I do. Time to give up completely on that one dream that I spent so much time trying to decide. There is this, it's an incredibly boring culture what we have right now. The people cannot even realize how beautiful it is to have a dream, to find something interesting enough that you want to do, and to have any kind of motivation to move forward inside of that terms and inside of that vision that you have created. And out of nowhere, simply because you had one bad experience, you will rob yourself out of the possibility of obtaining that. In which world does that seem the logical thing to do simply because you didn't obtain at the exact moment at which you portray it inside of your mind. It is it is bound to happen. You create expectations, you create an image. No matter what you do, the reality is always a different one. No matter to which degree you try to be a perfectionist in terms of the portrayal of the reality that you will be living, unless you can give it whatever definition you want. You can go with a miracle, you can go with a supernatural experience, you can go with a revelation, whatever you want to call it. Unless you experience something that shows you with a complete certainty what will be happening in the future, you never know what will be of you. Your mind can only do so much in terms of what might be of the rest. We are completely unaware of the thought process of every other person that exists around here. And it doesn't mean that you need to spend every single hour of your life thinking what will happen in order to have the perfect plan. It is simply you create something, and even if you know that it will fail in some manner or another, you create something solid enough so that you can keep on moving at the very least in a satisfactory way, even when it fails. And you can create a plan that seems solid enough and that takes into account also the human factor. What if sometimes what you are not even taking into account happens? What if your plan requires other people to show up? What if your plan is around a social group of humans, and you never know what can happen to the people who is around the people that you are counting on. You never know when something goes wrong in the life of somebody who you literally don't even know. You have no way of predicting something like that. But you cannot simply, because something of that the nature happened, stop everything and say, yeah, my plan failed. Time to fucking give up. Time to destroy everything that I imagined. Time to become my, at the very least, on the thought level, my worst enemy, and abandon any kind of hope that I had created, any kind of vision that I had made, and any kind of interesting idea that I was starting to form. Time to leave all of that behind. Because you know what? I find myself right now suffering one kind of upsetting loss of my time, I guess. Simply because of that, I have to discard everything. Doesn't need to work in that way. There is something incredibly important about discussing the future, and that is, in so many ways, life is an incredibly long journey and an incredibly extraneous one, unavoidably, but also rewarding one, as long as you can follow anything that feels interesting for you. Once again, you don't need to portray the most awesome one, the most complicated one. You simply need to have anything that feels rewarding to you, and you have so many ways to achieve that, and so many degrees of capacity of obtaining any kind of satisfactory response from the reality. If something that gets me instead of this whole discussion, sorry, is, and also sometimes you can plan properly. It doesn't mean that things are going to fail. Therefore, you cannot plan anything because unavoidably everything will end up getting screwed by the rest. Maybe you can try to portray it properly enough by yourself. Maybe you find out that indeed you were a good planner all along, that you have any possibility of creating a sensible enough list of steps that you need to follow. That's the whole idea of planning, and that's the whole problem of this. You cannot expect to simply find in front of you, completely out of the blue, what you had been expecting. It it certainly is bound inside of the human nature to desire things that seem easier in some ways. You want to go for the apple that is at the top of the tree. That is why this whole expression of the low hanging fruit is the most coveted one to a certain degree. Because what takes the least amount of effort will be the easiest thing for you to do. But it doesn't mean that, oh wow, difficulties will arise inside of my process of thinking. Negative negative experiences will be bound to be found whenever I try to do anything. So you know what? I will fuck everything up. I will do nothing to try and change how, even when things go wrong, I can ensure that I can keep moving forward. No, I will do my best to ensure that the moment in which I find myself experiencing any kind of setback, I will completely abandon what I was thinking at that moment, what I was hoping for at that instance. I do not need her to be my ally. After all, I already have people who can do that for me. I do not need to see myself as somebody who is also dependent on me. Paradoxically speaking, I do not need to try and create a solid enough plan. I can simply leave it all in the hands of others. I can say, yeah, eh, this part of responsibility is assigned to somebody else, and this other part to somebody else, and this and this and this, and the moment in which I end up realizing what I have around me, every single part of my life is dependent on somebody else. And if anything were to happen to every single person that I know, which I am incapable of knowing to any degree, nobody can ensure you that nothing will happen to those who you know. There is no way to completely be sure that hero hero now from the next 5 years, nothing will happen to the people that you like so much, that you are surrounded of. Nothing will happen to them, and that everything will stay the same. There is no way to know that. And there is too much safety in saying, yeah, I am bound to have a nice time, and I am bound to have the same kind of luxuries that I have right now. So I don't have to worry about planning what might be my future. I can keep on doing what I am doing, and I can keep on never changing anything at all, because so far, based on my previous experiences, I conclude that the rest of my whole life will be the same as it has been. No, sadly, it doesn't happen that way. It will be, I guess, we live idea, quote unquote, well-known idea. We live in a simulation. Sadly, it doesn't happen that way. Sadly, it isn't that easy to predict the reality and to predict what will be happening indeed. You cannot really know if the people that you care so much about won't suffer some incredibly stupid problem. Not because it is easy to solve, but rather because there is no real reason as to why it happened. There is no, instead of every single explanation that you can come up with, a logical one enough that can justify why out of nowhere you might be having an incredibly horrible time with the stuff that happens. And when all of those things happen instead of wow, life, it doesn't mean once again that you are bound to lose, that you are bound to fail. It is this incredibly toxic way of describing a reality in which, yeah, you need to, maybe you need to put all of your eggs inside of one basket, and the moment in which that one basket gets one hole, you don't have the possibility of patching it up and moving on. You need to deal with everything falling apart, and if you are lucky, you will have some remaining pieces to put the rest of your life together and live in complete shame because of that. You have to live an incredibly shameful life, full of nothing, because you had one setback, because you had one bad time, because somebody around you experienced something bad, because one of the things in which you were depending, one of the many structures that you had set up around yourself failed. Simply because of that, you have to give up everything else. That's how, no, that isn't how reality simply works. You are having so many ways the possibility of trying. It doesn't mean that you are obliged to lie every single day, to bleed yourself out, so to speak, trying to accomplish that the dream. It doesn't mean that you have to drive yourself against a wall every single morning just to try and gain what you seek so much. It is simply, you know, life is a complete piece of shit sometimes. You cannot live in a completely beautiful place the whole existence of yours. It sadly doesn't happen that way. It hasn't happened. Besides stories and legends and whatever you want to refer to, which in reality is not real, there is no way that any human whatsoever has only had a nice life, has only had nice moments happen to them. You are bound to experience bad things. You are bound to experience incredibly horrible stuff. You are bound to see all of those things for yourself to some degree or another. But it doesn't mean that just because of that life ends there, and simply just because of those pieces of anybody's life, it's the end. It's a lot more complicated to a certain degree than that. It is it is a picture that gets bigger the more you try to observe it, so to speak. There are too many details that anybody can ignore because they are simply impossible to take into account. There are so many ways in which also, and I mean, I have to accept it. I am quite a quite a cynic in those terms. There are also so many ways in which things can go even better than what you can even expect. There are so many ways in which, once again, you shouldn't expect this stuff from people. It goes in both ways. The moment in which you find out that people are not so incredibly harsh to you, the moment in which you start to minimally realize that not everyone is trying to get you, so to speak, that not everyone fucking hates you out of nowhere, nobody knows who you are. Why would people have a completely negative stance towards you if they don't even know who the fuck they are talking to? It's a completely irrational way of thinking the world. This modern idea of yeah, everybody is a completely dangerous individual, and you should be completely wary of what you have around yourself. You shouldn't trust anything that exists around you right now because the world is an incredibly complicated land, a land in which everybody is trying to destroy the human that they have next to themselves. Do you not do you not see the world? Do you not see people trying their best to survive? Do you think everyone has enough free time to try and kill another human being? To try and destroy them that much? It is a completely I I I don't soft term. It is an irrational way of thinking the world to believe that everything will be so bad and that everything will be so negative. Once you try to move yourself towards the goals that you might have, it's an incredibly irrational manner that one of, yeah, things will go badly. Things will be incredibly hard just because you are you. Nobody knows who the fuck you are. Nobody knows who anybody else is. That's the gift of this world, that no matter how much time you spend with somebody, you will never know completely how complex they are and how many beautiful things they have inside of themselves, how many pieces are composing the person that you have in front of you, and how many of those things will never be revealed, no matter how much you try, are a part of this same experience that everybody has to some degree or another. It is an irrational way of experiencing this part of life, I guess, to say, yeah, this this thing is going to be hard, and this thing is going to be in any manner a complicated thing, a complicated piece of life. This is going to be tough, and just because it is going to be tough, you are going to now find yourself incapacitated to do anything at all, completely incapacitated to do anything, just because perhaps you found yourself having one setback. It's I know I spend too much time saying the same thing, but it's not the healthy way to think about it. You try to talk about the future, and the first thing is, oh wow, but the future is so uncertain. Yeah. Do you know how uncertain it was where you are right now? Do you know how many people have already died and were completely wrong about what will be your present situation? Do you know how much we are already wrong about what will come next? Do you think it changes anything really to be wrong about what will happen next? Besides the obvious, oh wow, what you're expecting isn't going to happen. Besides that surface level revelation, water is wet kind of idea. Do you think it truly contributes anything to say something as basic as that? Do you find it inside of yourself to be the newest piece of information, the newest addition to your arsenal of argumentative ideas that, wow, yeah, future, the future is uncertain. What? Just because of that, you're not going to give it a try? Just because of that, you mean that it isn't worth it giving it a try? Just because you don't know what will happen in any direction. You are not given the capacity to think for yourself, to try and minimally make an understandable picture out of what could be. You don't have the possibility simply because it might not be. Simply because of that, you have everything else. It's like, I don't know, man. Sometimes it moves beyond complete irrationality. I find it to be more along the lines of a savage way of thinking about the world and trying to make it an incredibly horrible and horrendous place in general to exist in. Land that is barren of any enjoyable thing and something that will never have anything whatsoever that can feel good. And the only action that you can quote unquote take instead of there is to struggle. Everybody to a certain degree has to fight inside of life, but it doesn't mean that it is a horrible thing. Going back to what I already said, even if what you are doing in the present is something, or even if you were to be doing in the present that feels bad, even if that were to be your reality, it doesn't mean that it will never feel good, or that you are doing it because there is nothing else to do. There is the gift of having a hope, the gift of having a vision, moving beyond simply the level of, yeah, you have you have this piece of you have this an important piece of existence, you have to try and do your best to never care about that. There is nothing to care about in any degree. So what you do when you can't care about nothing? You simply keep on consuming. And what do you keep on consuming? Whatever is already existing around you, whatever is already given to you. And what do you find yourself to be surrounded with? Completely useless, quote unquote, commodities. This market of, yeah, you can consume this next product, you can consume this next piece of media, you can consume this next movie, this next game, you can consume this next completely meaningless video, channel, book. There are so many things that don't add to any degree anything. And it's okay to not say, never, not just once, never try to say anything about those things. It's the completely normal thing, and it's the completely standardized activity to have all of that already existing and have all of that already ingrained on life and nothing else. It's the message is lost in the way. At some point, I don't know if the word is it stopped being preached or whatever you wanna say, but it certainly needs to be minimally expressed that indeed you have the possibility of thinking by yourself so many things. Why don't you give it a try? Why don't you see for yourself what could happen if you were to minimally portray things for what they could be? What if you were to make a picture out something that seems interesting? What if you were to sacrifice the next 5 years of your life to try and ensure any kind of minimally rewarding thing to happen? What if you were to do that instead of simply being annoyed consistently by what is your actual life? Instead of having nothing that feels rewarding. Instead of living a life which feels horrible, instead of having no satisfaction whatsoever, no kind of gratification gained by yourself, instead of having to always rely on things that you never care about, that if they were to be gone tomorrow, your life itself will never change. Because you know what is happening? It is that you are already surrounded by things that are incredibly easy to replace. And and you don't mind it. It's like, to which degree have you abandoned what you already had before? What is to be a human being? What is to exist inside of this world? What is to have any possibility inside of your hands? It. I know it's too harsh. Certainly, it doesn't need to be so harsh in so many ways. But it's simply that reality of, yeah, the human has the possibility of thinking, and just with those things, in so many ways, things get better. Just with that, in so many ways, life is nice. It's the satisfaction of existing isn't a privilege that some get. If you try to experience the world, you realize in so many horrible places, because that's the objective reality. There are people who are happy with all of that, and there are people who enjoy what they have around them. And there are people who can minimally find some happiness instead of those incredibly shitty situations, instead of those places that have no satisfactory thing for them, at a surface level at least. There is this narrative of, yeah, the world has nothing to offer. That's completely wrong. That's completely mistaken. The world has so many things that are interesting, and that's the disgraceful thing of existing, I guess. That you cannot truly express any of that. How can I? One of the many problems, for example, of trying to talk about the future, how can I tell you what might be an interesting idea to pursue if you don't give a single fuck about what might be interesting in regards to what I think? How can I try to describe to you what seems a possibly useful thing to do if you don't find it inside of yourself to be at all a utility? I cannot simply tell you and can try to force you to change into being what I find useful for myself and for my personal objectives. You're gifted with the possibility of finding out, of using your time, of investing all of what you might have in the future instead of a completely monotonous life, which means nothing, which has no reward, and which guarantees no kind of true satisfaction. You can risk not having that for the reward of, oh wow, I am going to use my time to find out what I truly desire, to find out what might be a problem that I can solve, to find out what is a situation in which I can make a minimal useful change, to find out what is the world capable of offering me, what I can offer to the world, and what I can do inside of it, which can also make it a better place. What are in so many ways the things that are already existing that I can try to use my time and try to use it in something that is rewarding, that isn't empty like what is in so many ways the present existence today. This, I try to minimally try and avoid mentioning any of this, but without getting so deep into that, I remember hearing something along the lines of there is a particular group in the world which has no interest whatsoever of caring out what the rest of the world might be. And it isn't particularly a tiny population of the world, it is an incredibly notorious big group of people who has no possibility of feeling any satisfaction by using their time on any of this stuff, you know? It's it's as if they were completely incapable of thinking all that. And it's too inhuman to say something like that. It's too I I guess the best word is idiotic to try and describe the world as something so empty. Describe another human being because that's the main point. We are talking about people. I don't give a single fuck about particularly who you are. The possibility of changing is something embedded inside of everyone. And that's the beautiful thing about it. You cannot portray it as something that only applies to one particular piece of the population. In some ways, it does take a lot more effort, if you wanna say it like that. But it doesn't mean that even in the worst living conditions, nobody can do anything to try and find themselves to have a better one. It's it's irrational to simply say, yeah, there is this one piece, there is this one side that might as well not possess that capacity to care about the world. It's it's completely insulting to say something like that. And assuming the problem is with their ways of being educated. Okay, perfect. You have already identified what the problem is. What about trying to change it in any way? What about not staying in the level of, oh yeah, and there are these people, there are these groups who can't realize that their lives are better. There are so many distinct types of humans that will never have the possibility of realizing that life can be good. Perfect. You know who they are. What about trying to do something instead of simply negating from them the possibility of having a fulfilling life? You can experience one for yourself. What makes you believe that nobody else wants to also try and have something like that? It's it's completely insulting to a certain degree. But I guess that's not particularly the main point of this, luckily enough. It's just, one second, trying to restart where we were. It's simply about this idea of future, human efforts, future. Stuff needs to happen. You need to organize life. You need to, if you want to refer yourself to somebody popular, if we are so much in need of name drops, a particular name drop, uh, Jordan Peterson, for example, types of psychology and whatever you want to say, you need to order your room. No, you need to order your mind. You need to try and establish any kind of order inside of your own mind. You can't think if you don't even give yourself the time to do something like that. You cannot afford to be capable of trying to find out what you might care about if you don't even give yourself the instances inside of your own reality to try and observe what you already have around, what might be the next place in which you have to be, what are the sequence of actions that you need to take, what are the particularities of things that you have to do. I am pretty sure that doesn't need to be so complicated in so many ways. It's a more rewarding adventure than what it also is made to sound. Life is paraphrasing. Life is going to be hard, but you can still keep going. No, life isn't hard in any way. If you can properly find out what you want, things get so much easier. There are so many things that you can realize the moment in which you stop for yourself and think. Once again, main point, the future, the moment in which you understand that you don't stop existing tomorrow, you have a life to sustain. You have your own life to keep on sustaining for who knows how many years. You might also have the possibility of existing not just for what you are. You might keep on existing as the legacy of what you used to be in your future family. You have all of those chances and all of those gifts in the future. And you can keep on moving towards those things and you can ensure that those minimally try to become a reality. But you cannot simply because they take some effort say, yeah, they are so hard. Time to completely disregard them. It's meaningless. It's a way of life that is meaningless. Life is not so much an overcomplicated piece. It's simply something that takes time. That's the main piece. And that's the main part of this whole idea, I guess. But once the human understands, so to speak, that things can minimally feel good, life gets better. And it stops being so much of a horrible existence, so much of a horrible experience as it used to be described before. Anyway, give me a bit. I want to doing something while I try to think what else I am missing. Well, I mean, I kinda mentioned that. I kinda don't fully mention also that because, conceptually speaking, we are really talking about the individual. So we have even if minimally at all, consider the whole structure of other humans around the individual. So what we are talking about also is the future, human efforts, an unavoidable reality. Most of the things require other people, require the existence of other humans. So, shocking discovery, at some point or another, you also need to start taking into account the rest of the humans. We already partially discussed the part of, wow, yeah, you cannot completely depend on anybody, you cannot completely disregard everyone also, or neither, but more on the side of, and it also is a possibility that you can, after enough practice, with trustable enough people, try to minimally create an understandable enough plan, something that can be rewarding to try and do with other people around you, something that possesses a good enough justification inside of your life, and not just inside of your singular life, instead of the life that you are carrying with your community, with your people, with your city. That, that it's obviously a huge leap, something that I don't think I properly ever covered in some of this discussion at the very least. But final goal, if you are capable of integrating enough, you can start thinking about the whole world as something that is also part of you. It isn't something that has you and that you have nothing to deal with. It's the reality of, yeah, you exist and also everything else exists around you. You have the possibility of experiencing so many things. You have the possibility of influencing so many beautiful things. You have the gift of change, the capacity of taking action in any kind of respect that you might minimally care about. all of that is impressive enough, and you simply disregard it because it seems hard, because it seems challenging. It should be a reality that everybody can experience. That, yeah, the challenges are sometimes what is the most worthy something to do. Sometimes what seems quote unquote complicated is simply something that takes time once again. The moment in which you find out that, yeah, and the life of other people can also be made better. The people of other places can find satisfaction in knowing that somebody's assisting in any manner, like in so many ways, the current human, that one is needed that same degree of assistance, even if you can't at this instant realize that. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that simply because you exist, the phones were invented. Simply because you exist, every single kind of commodity was created, and every single kind of amazing technological advance was made. And all just to satisfy this one individual. It's the complete grace and beautifulness of the gift of everyone else that decided to, yeah, and now the human can have a laptop, so to speak. Now everybody has access to internet. Everybody has access to not every single piece of information. Unavoidably, countries, private agencies, whatever you want to name, hold information from others. Perfect. But at the very least, you have access to so many information right now that you will die before you get to see even a 1% of that. It's it's overly stupid to stay in the place of comfort in so many ways. It's overly negative to do that. It isn't about, oh yeah, I am I am suffering the world, so you should also suffer the world. No, it's the world can be a rewarding enough place, and you can do something that feels rewarding by itself. You don't need to be always in pain and always suffering about the existence that you have to carry. It's not something that needs to feel so much like shit, and it's not safe enough. That's the real problem. That's the real inconsistency with how we treat the present world, with how we talk about the present things and problems and whatever else you want to say. But yeah, that's another topic that I was kinda forgetting. So perhaps give me like another second to think about what else I might be missing. I mean, yeah, it should have been kind of implied as what I described before, but also there are so many ways in which the future can can be changed so radically by single individual efforts. Once again, there are so many ways. Already, previous examples serve to show that the actions taken by an individual can properly modify the rest of history, so to speak, the rest of things that you can do, and the rest of beautiful realities that you can experience in this world. All of those things can be, in one way or another, minimally changed to have a better time at not only once again, not only for oneself, the gift of assisting the whole world, the gift of a creation that might be useful enough for the rest of humanity is always there. It doesn't need to be also particularly my My limited way of speech might make it sound like I am referring only to technological advances. No, we have 1,000 different fields nowadays in which any human can spend their whole life investigating. Perhaps you can make a medical discovery. Perhaps you can make a biological one. Perhaps you can advance any kind of science. Something something incredibly beautiful that was said was along the lines of, and yeah, sometimes spending an individual is spending their whole life pursuing something that seemed to be completely stupid to the rest ended up being justified. You need to expect that what you are doing will end up getting finally understood right now. The moment in which you express it to the world. Sometimes things take decades, dozens, hundreds of years to be properly understood. There are so many pieces of knowledge that we have yet to fully decipher, and we have so many other parts of our current world to yet analyze and minimally make sense of, that it's incredibly nonsensical to say, yeah, you only have a handful of fields in which you can make any contribution whatsoever. No, that's not the reality, sadly. That's not the world in which we live, sadly. But you can still decide to stay with the other narrative, I guess. It's always an individual decision, nothing else. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I have like a little bit more of water. Perhaps I will take a final sip, and if I don't come up with anything else, we'll we will call it a day. Uh, it was completely unintentional, but they most of the time are like short sessions. Not not a really short, but like what's the word? School sessions. Like yeah, when you're attending classes, at the very least that's my case. They are always almost like 90 minutes long. Uh, I don't remember the word. I'm too fucking ESL. Sorry. Okay, I remember lectures. They are 90-minute lectures. So certainly I'm not a professor. Certainly I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Uh, uh, a little bit of insight. Always doubt what I say. Never trust me, please. Never assume that what I am saying is good. A little interesting idea for the future. We're talking about the future. Interesting idea for the future. Understand what the fuck is manipulation. Everybody is, to a certain degree or another, trying to convince you of stuff. Perhaps you don't realize it. Perhaps you believe that somebody is saying something interesting that sounds good because they have the best of your interest into account. Perhaps no, it isn't happening. Once again, I might be completely acting in regards to what I find myself, subjectively speaking, good, while completely ignoring your subjective experience of the world and while completely disregarding what you are as an individual and what you see as a true problem. So you want to understand properly that side of human efforts that has to deal with individual. Consider how much you're also being convinced of stuff that you don't care about. Perhaps everything that I said is wrong. It's your chance to learn about whatever is it that I am talking about and be capable of saying, yeah, this was complete shit. I spent my time on something that is completely wrong. But it also, once again, it takes time. No matter what you do, it takes time. So, good luck using your time in any way. And even if you quote unquote don't use it, it still keeps passing by. So, don't worry. But yeah, Thank you. I guess, yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this sixth part, I guess. The future. I think I mentioned everything. I hope I did. At the very least, I mentioned the most important stuff that I was capable of remembering. But yeah, uh, short note. What's footnote for this episode? I I had on trying to minimally apply what I talk out on every single piece. I didn't realize myself that I was so incredibly fucking unorganized before. I used to have like no, I still don't have a schedule, but more like no habits that I was following, no consistency check, so to speak. Not no consistency, no consistency check. Something incredibly negative is to ignore also how much you need to do things and how much you should be interested in the stuff that you have to do. Not in terms of interest itself, but rather properly processing how much you are trying to do the things that you are trying to do in a physical manner, in something that isn't inside of your own mind. There is, I think it is a rather negative part if you were to be completely alone, but that the reality is the human doesn't really work and process in general information that well when you don't keep any track of it whatsoever in a lot of ways. So if you are, I guess, footnote, if you're trying to understand anything that has to do with the human and whatever, try to keep some track of stuff. For example, something that I did mention, you have to plan out stuff. You want to move into any kind of dream. You plan it out, not only mentally, you should better fucking write it down before you forget it. It will happen unavoidably. So yeah, that's everything I guess. I ran out of schizophrenic choices to keep on saying stuff. I guess yeah, I have that much more on me so far for today. So thank you. Am I missing anything? I hope not. And if I am, I don't know. So yeah, uh, thank you for everything. I guess. Have a good night, have a good day, have a good evening, have a good whatever. Life is short. Do anything interesting. Do stuff. Experience the world and don't simply see it pass by, I guess. But on a more formal note, yeah, please take care, hydrate, take rest, do all of the things that you need to do to stay healthy. You already know what the fuck you need to do. You're an adult, supposedly, so do those things, please. Thank you very much. I guess until next episode, I can't come up with anything else. I hope the next one is finally the final one, the whole roundup, roundup of this thing. I guess. Anyway, good night. Bao. Bao bao. Say Fuamoko.